Have you ever been to South Africa? I think you should. And you may want to start from Joburg to Cape Town in Eastern Cape. It's beautiful, trust me, and well developed down there. And they've got good roads and massive infrastructure and hospitals. Believe me, it's a wonderful country to visit. However, ladies and gentlemen, they have since 1994 been ruled by black South Africans as president. And I wonder sometimes how the country will look like if its leadership was headed by a white minority. Will it be apartheid 2.0? Most probably. But if not, what do you think could be the ceiling of South Africa's economy if that were to happen? I have a theory on this, and you should want to hear it. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Cyrus, and be sure to subscribe and click on the notification bell if you haven't done that already. So, from 1994 to 1999, we saw the first black president of South Africa in office. The all-time African hero in the person of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Then Thabo Mbeki took over from 1999 to 2008. I always referred to that man as a true statesman. Mbeki was followed by Jacob Zuma and now Cyril Ramaphosa. But in between Zuma and Ramaphosa, we saw Kgalema Motlanthe as president for a few months. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's been 5 presidents already in South Africa in a space of 30 years and counting. And the country's GDP today is over $300 billion. Meanwhile, at the time of their liberation in 1994 from apartheid, the country's GDP was $153.5 billion. Let's do the math. Let's take out 1994's GDP from today's GDP of $373.2 billion. So $373.2 billion minus $153.5 billion equals $219.7 billion. Now, let's divide this figure by 30 years and see the average performance of South Africa post-apartheid for each year. So $219.7 billion divided by 30 years equals $7.32 billion averagely for a year in 30 years, meaning that South Africa, led by black South African presidents, have grown the economy at an average rate of $7.32 billion. That's for year on year. This figure may look huge until you begin to compare that with South Africa's contemporaries. And these are South Africa's contemporaries, ladies and gentlemen. Russia, South Korea, Malaysia, Brazil, India, and China. And guess how much these countries' economy grew in the last 30 years? Let's take Brazil, for instance. In 1994, Brazil had a GDP of $546.2 billion. Today, Brazil is $2.3 trillion of GDP. So from 1994 till now, Brazil has added $1.74 trillion to their GDP, growing at a yearly average of $58 billion. So South Africa added $7.3 billion a year. Brazil adds $58 billion a year, all in 30 years span. I hope you are following my analysis, because I want to talk about what would happen if the situation was rather in the hands of a white president. And I'm talking about it very soon. Let's do one more for Malaysia. In 1994, Malaysia had a GDP of $74.5 billion. Today, Malaysia's GDP is $406 billion. So Malaysia added $331.5 billion to their economy in 30 years, which translates to a yearly average of $11.1 billion. So here again, South Africa did $7.3 billion per year. Brazil did $58 billion per year. Malaysia added $11.1 billion a year. we won't even bother talking about Russia, China, and India's GDP in the last 30 years. I can accept to give South Africa's leadership some room for error because they had just come out of apartheid rule whilst their peers were fully in charge of their countries for decades before 1994. So all of that will have to be factored in. But notwithstanding, ladies and gentlemen, let's assume if the situation was flipped the other way around, where there were white presidents in South Africa for the same 30 years, what do you think the economic numbers, ladies and gentlemen, would have been? And listen, I totally understand the part where these white folks, ladies and gentlemen, would have deployed another means to continue with some form of injustice and apartheid in their favor in South Africa till today, should they have been in position of power as president of South Africa after 1994. I totally understand that reality of that thing happening, and I do not underestimate them under any circumstance. But assuming if they had been fair to treat all South Africans equally, would they have done a better job for the country or worse? You may leave your comment below in the comment section, and be mindful of your language. Sometimes it may seem as though you are doing so well until you are paired with a real competition. On the African continent, $7 billion addition to GDP per year looks like it's pretty good. But on the world stage, especially when compared with Asians or Middle Easterners or Western countries, it doesn't look that impressive. Take, for instance, Nigeria. In 1994, they had a GDP of $80.4 billion. Today, Nigeria's GDP is $477.4 billion. So, at the time the white government released power to black government in South Africa, South Africa's economy was way bigger than Nigeria's. South Africa's economy was $153.5 billion compared to the $80.4 billion of Nigeria. However, since then, Nigeria has added $397 billion to their GDP, which translates to $13.2 billion per year. So comparatively, Nigeria has achieved more under the most corrupt governments they've had in the last 30 years. South Africa is doing 7.3, Nigeria is doing $13.2 billion in that same span. So, has the South African government done well with their black leaders, or could they have done better, ladies and gentlemen, with white leadership? Finally, the best country to compare with South Africa's economy or growth of economy will be Rwanda, because in 1994, when South Africa had their first black government, Rwanda also ended their civil war. Since that time, Rwanda has had only 2 presidents against South Africa's 5 presidents. Pastor Bizimungu from 1994 to 2000 and Paul Kagame from 2000 till now. These are their presidents. Rwanda's GDP in 1994 was a paltry $753.6 million, not even up to $1 billion. And remember, it's a small landlocked country. Today, Rwanda's GDP is $13.3 billion. So Rwanda since 1994 has added $12.5 billion in 30 years. When you divide that by 30 years, they get somewhere around $416.7 million per year. Not even up to $1 billion. So clearly, when you compare the performance of South Africa's economy to Rwanda and many other African economies, they are doing quite okay until you step it up to its peers. Am I being foolish to even think the way I'm thinking, or is it in order? Leave the comments below. If you care to know about Ghana's economic situation in comparison to South Africa, well, I'll tell you, and I'll let you know now. In 1994, Ghana had $5.4 billion economy. Today, Ghana's GDP is $72.8 billion. So Ghana added $67.4 billion, meaning that Ghana's economy only grew $2.2 billion every year. What a shame for 30 years. So as it stands now, South Africa is doing 7.3, Nigeria is doing 13.2, Ghana is doing a paltry $2.2 billion. So let's hear from you in the comment section if maybe South Africa should consider voting for a white president, or maybe not. Thanks for taking time to watch today's episode, and catch you in the next one. Remember to subscribe and click on the notification bell for more content. I'll see you soon.